Joining us now to discuss this testimony today and a lot of what Christopher Wray had to say, Kyle Seraphin is here. He's a former FBI agent and the host of the excellent Kyle Seraphin Podcast. Kyle, good to have you back with us, sir.
Hey, Vince. Good to be back with you.
So, this is unusual that you got an FBI director in a position to share the details of an ongoing investigation, but this is a pretty exceptional case, isn't it?
It is. It's more than I expected from him. So kudos to Chris Wray. We'll give him credit where credit is due. He came and answered some questions that I totally expected him to defer on and hide behind the ongoing investigation shield. So good for him for doing that. It tells me that he's got an awful lot of discretion when he wants to do so, and that he doesn't have to abide by the ongoing investigation policy or requirement or protocol whenever he wants to talk about things. So
right.
I think that's also a takeaway.
Yeah, that's an important takeaway, that he makes it up as he goes along. In this case, he's saying he can share information. The American people definitely want to know a lot about this. Andy Biggs, Congressman Andy Biggs, was one of the few lawmakers who concentrated on getting new information out of the FBI director. I was annoyed by so many of the lawmakers who failed to use their time well. Here's Andy Biggs asking about whether or not the gunman did come with the gun or it was bunked at the scene.
The shooter took the gun up with him when he climbed up to the top of the roof, or was it already placed there somewhere?
So that is something that we're drilling into right now that we don't know the answer to yet. I can tell you, which may be relevant, though, to your question, that, and I don't think this has been reported yet, that the weapon had a collapsible stock, which could explain why it might have been less easy for people to observe, because one of the things that we're finding is people have observed him, the first people to observe him with the weapon were when he was already on the roof, and we haven't yet found anybody with firsthand observation of him with the weapon walking around beforehand. So that doesn't mean he wasn't, obviously, but the collapsible stock is potentially a very significant feature that might be relevant to that.
How is that feature? How is that an important feature? I mean, an AR-15 having a collapsible stock is pretty typical, isn't it?
I think that he's misconstruing what he's trying to say because he's not a firearms guy. That was demonstrated pretty clearly when he was talking to Eric Swalwell about the difference between bolt action and semi-automatic. So Chris Wray's not a gun guy. He claimed that he, likes to shoot guns, but I don't believe him either. I don't believe a lot of the stuff he says. When they say collapsible stock, the odds are they're actually talking about a folding stock, and that is actually a significant modification. There are certain things out there, the SIG MPC series, or the MCX series, rather. You'll find some of these will actually fold in half. There's an adapter you can actually buy for less expensive firearms. It's called the Law Tactical Folder, where you push a button. It was actually designed by a Secret Service agent of all things. And you can actually fold the buffer tube and the stock so that it lays flush and kind of bends backwards along the receiver.
Right.
So for an AR-15, that's going to take, anywhere between 8 and 12 inches of length off. That's pretty significant.
Yeah.
But it does look like he had a full-size barrel. So we're talking about a 16-inch barrel plus another maybe close to 12 inches worth of receiver or 10 inches of receiver. And the adapter actually is another inch long. It's not a small thing to hide.
No.
So I don't know how much that adds to it, but
and his outfit didn't look like he would have been able to conceal a weapon like that, even if it was folded in half. It didn't.
That's totally true. Yeah, I mean, he's wearing shorts, right? He's not dressed like the Columbine guys. I think if you saw somebody in a long black overcoat trying to talk holiday, then we'd have a different opinion about what was going on.
I had the same reaction, though, that you did, which is like Chris Wray doesn't even understand firearms because he said a collapsible stock. That's like a 3-inch at best, like condensing of the stock. That wouldn't actually hide a long gun in any way, and he made that out to be a really big deal. So you think he was probably referring to a folding stock?
That's the most likely piece. Look, like I said, I'll give him credit that he came and he talked about there were 5 pieces of brass collected, which means 5 shots fired. That they were able to.
The number was 8.
8. Sorry.
Yep.
Yeah, you're right. I've got it here on my screen here. I'm looking wrong. He said that the guy had minimal contacts in his phone. I think that's interesting. Fits the profile of a loner.
Yeah.
That was worth doing. He also mentioned later on in the testimony that the subject climbed up on the AGR building using mechanical equipment and vertical pipes and not a ladder, which was there were pictures of ladders going around on the 13th and the 14th and the 15th, and the speculation on whether he carried or brought a ladder. So that would also kind of give us some information. So he brought some information. Like, we'll give the guy credit. He said some things about the shooter, more than I would have expected. So good for him.
He confined all of his remarks, though, to the investigation into the shooter in particular. They said they've conducted, I think he said hundreds of interviews, a lot of interviews with witnesses. I would assume a lot of the attendees are a part of that. Certainly many of the members of law enforcement. who were there tasked with the security of President Trump in that event. His job, I think you would agree, is not to investigate the Secret Service, but I imagine he's gleaning a lot of information that is highly relevant to the failures that were involved that day.
Yeah, when you start hearing what the witnesses say, it's going to paint a bigger picture of what happened and what didn't happen. I honestly, still to right now, the most credible theory of what happened is probably the one that is available to the public. And Senator Josh Hawley actually pushed out a whistleblower sort of disclosure via letter that said he was told it was too hot on the roof, and Secret Service guys or whoever the protective detail that was supposed to be up on the roof didn't go post because they were uncomfortable. That sounds like the most accurate government assessment that I've ever heard in my entire life. And I'm a guy who spent 12 hours on my feet during Trump's inauguration in the cold, and it was kind of miserable, and I had the wrong shoes. You just do it. Yeah. I was out there also for State of the Unions over and over again during Trump's time. And, if you get a chance to sit in a vehicle when it's cold outside, you do that. If you have a chance to go inside, maybe you do that too. It shouldn't be when you're covering one of the most critical areas where someone might be able to sneak up and pull a rifle. If you're on the back end of something where nobody cares where you are anyway and nobody's calling you in on the radio, then maybe it's a little different. But it sounds like the most plausible government excuse is that somebody just got lazy. And isn't that a horrible thought?
That is a horrible thought.
That shallow.
Yeah, that is a horrible thought. One of the things I've been talking about here, Kyle Seraphin, is it's crystal clear that the Biden administration views the Secret Service as a gift to be bestowed. And that's why they didn't give it to RFK. They didn't want him to have the image of the Secret Service around him, making him appear as a legitimate presidential candidate. It was purely done for political reasons that he was left unprotected. And, of course, to drain his campaign coffers to pay for his own security. The other piece is they begrudgingly give Donald Trump Secret Service protection that the Biden administration doesn't really want to, but their hands are tied by law as a former president of the United States. So I really do think that in the case of RFK and definitely Donald Trump, Secret Service protection is like an afterthought for those guys.
I definitely agree with you on that, especially the draining the coffers and worrying about a political rival. RFK, he's got a lot more credibility in the left-leaning space and would definitely draw voters away. So that makes sense. And then on top of it, I mean, we know that House Democrats were trying to pull even Trump's detail away. And Tom Massey was just on Twitter earlier today saying, if you were part of that sort of campaign or push, or if you were sad that the president wasn't killed, I don't think you or your staff should have anything to do with the committees we're going to do on trying to find out the truth on what happened. So I think that's also accurate. But this instinct has been out there. They suddenly just got called to the table,
right? And
now they're having to account. And it's just like seeing it. Like when I was in the military, it's the same story. You do something stupid, you think you got away with it. The minute that something really serious happens and there's an inquiry, everybody puckers up and everybody realizes like, oh no, how am I going to be able to spin this? And can I just get away with a letter of reprimand? And maybe people will forget that I did this because it's terrible.
Yeah, it is. It's certainly terrible. All right, let me go to something else that I want to get your reaction to, the role that the shooter's drone plays in all of this and the way the FBI has been digging into the drone activity. I found this to be fascinating, wondering your perspective as a former FBI guy. Take a listen to this.
Tell me about the drone. You act like you wanted to fill us in on that. Fill us in.
So we have recovered a drone that the shooter appears to have used. It's being exploited and analyzed by the FBI lab. The drone was recovered in his vehicle. So at the time of the shooting, the drone was in his vehicle with the controller. In addition, our investigation has uncovered...
Do you know what time of day he flew it, and if he flew it on the day of the shot?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So in addition, it appears that around 3:50 p.m., 4 o'clock in that window on the day of the shooting, that the shooter was flying the drone around the area
2 hours
for about 11 minutes. I want to be clear, but when I say the area, not over the stage and that part of the area itself, but I would say about 200 yards, give or take, away from that. We think, but we do not know. So again, this is one of these things that's qualified because of our ongoing review, that he was live streaming, viewing the footage from that, again, about 11 minutes in around the 3:50, 4 o'clock p.m. range.
2 hours before, he's flying a drone in the vicinity of the route.
About 200 yards away, yes.
200 yards, okay.
A couple of elements here, Kyle Seraphin. When the Secret Service director says they believe he was live streaming, they don't mean to a public audience. They mean just right back to his controller. Is that what you're gathering?
Yeah, absolutely. Same if you have like there's thermal scopes and things like that, and they will mirror the image inside the scope of the camera over to a to a tablet or to a phone that you want to do. So you can set them up at distances. That all makes sense. I'll tell you what, I've got kind of a novel take on listening to Wray do this, because this is, again, more information than we would expect from the ongoing investigation.
Right.
I think this is an angle, because not long after that, he talked about how they were under budget. Another kind of set-up question from the Democrats asked him how he was doing on money, and he said in 2024 they got $500 million less than they wanted, and 2025 is looking like they'll even be less than that. Then he made some claims about the number of criminals that they arrest today, which are mostly state and law enforcement, local law enforcement task force officers doing these arrests when they talk about 150 criminals a day or whatever he was saying. But I actually think he's angling for more funding. Would it be nice to have the FBI drone division? They need to have more room. He also didn't say it explicitly, but he alluded to it, having problems with encrypted devices, that this is an ongoing problem for law enforcement. And this is something that even goes back to Jim Comey's time, 2014 or so, what they refer to as the Going Dark Initiative, where the FBI basically thinks they should have a skeleton key to all end-to-end encryption on the outside chance that someone uses end-to-end encryption to hide a crime. And that would mean essentially the end to privacy and the tools that are available for individuals to have privacy on the outside chance that you screw it up and use it in an inappropriate way.
My reaction to was similar to yours. I was kind of grateful that he was complaining about the government can't rifle through all of your private communications. I thought that was a good thing, actually. I know that he's complaining about it, but it gave me some, I don't know, it just gave me some joy, actually. I want to play one last thing for you before we let you go here, Kyle Seraphin. Chip Roy confronted Chris Wray about the standards for FBI agents and said to him, well, a bunch of former agents say you've been lowering them. Take a listen.
Are you familiar with reporting that we have, and we've asked questions to you about this? I'm not sure the result of the questions, that to more, quote, easily accommodate a larger pool of available applicants, FBI special agent hiring standards have been relaxed and requirements measurably lowered. This according to a group of former agents who have testified about this and written a report and submitted it to Congress. In addition, specifically, minority people with 20-year careers, one in particular, a minority served for more than 20 years, wrote in this report and submitted it to Congress saying that these standards were in fact lowered, and that in fact, if you were hiring, you were moved off of hiring if you put quality above these kinds of DEI requirements. Do you reject this report? And do you have comments on this report?
I haven't read.
You're aware of the report.
I'm aware of the report. I know that I've read every detail of it, but I can tell you that the claim that we have lowered our standards to be less selective and less competitive is not accurate.
So do you believe these former agents are lying to Congress when they submit a report to Congress stipulating and suggesting otherwise? Or are you saying that they are lying?
I'm saying they're mistaken.
They're mistaken. Kyle Seraphin, you were among those agents, right?
Yeah, no, he's categorically misinterpreting the words of selectivity. So he's probably using that they have some different selection bias, and it has to do with number of points you get for being a disabled vet, and it works if you have a different skin color or a gender ideology under your belt. But at the end of the day, the quality of the applicants coming out probably started even before my class got there, because my class was a mixed bag of people that you would be blown away with. A-listers who had experience overseas doing all kinds of wild stuff, whether they be former CIA analysts, whether they be bureau chiefs working in foreign countries and spoke multiple languages and worked for foreign press and so on. And then you'd also have people like the one example I love to give. I had a guy who was an unarmed security guard at the Detroit Zoo for 3 years. And that was his qualification to be an FBI agent, which is really strange when you have guys who are former Green Berets or Navy SEALs also getting that same job. So it's false. But like I say, he loves to slant around the edges by saying things that don't mean the same thing to you and me.
Right.
I listened to him say the exact same stuff about some of their questions. He was talking about a form where security division was going after people who were Trump supporters. And he said, well, it was created by this person, and we stopped using it. It was isolated use only. And it's like, yeah, it was isolated to the security division. We know that's where the form was created. So he does play this game. Chris Wray is dumb, and nobody should ever think otherwise. He's more than capable of walking circles around most of these folks who generally get up there and are looking for a soundbite. They want to go out and do a little speech. They want to get on, whether it be Fox or MSNBC or CNN later. So they do a nice little hit where they say their thing, and they set him up for an easy answer, and he walks around them every time.
Yeah, he's a good actor. He's more cunning than his demeanor lets on. Thank you very much. Kyle Seraphin, always good to talk to you, sir.